Mark continues on, no man also sews a piece of new cloth on an old garment. Luke has this introductory phrase, and he spoke also a parable to them. No man puts a piece of new garment upon an old. Okay, so I'm definitely going to have that from Luke only. And he spoke also a parable to them. No man puts a piece of a new garment. No man also sews a piece of a new cloth on an old garment. Okay, so no man is both. No man sews is much more descriptive than puts. Although I don't know why he says no man also sews a piece of new cloth on an old garment. It's almost as if he's putting also because he's continuing on his response, saying not only that, no man sews a piece of new cloth. So I don't want to put the also, but I think I might have to. Yeah, I'll just do it. Also sews from Mark only, and then a piece from both. Of new cloth, of a new garment upon an old, of new cloth on an old garment. Huh. I could use garment twice, and I could say a piece of a new garment upon an old garment, but Mark says cloth on an old garment, Luke says new garment upon an old. They both only say garment once. I could use garment twice, since it's used earlier and then later between Luke and Mark. No, I don't want to do that. So new garment upon an old, or new cloth on an old garment. I think cloth on an old garment, it's more descriptive than just saying an old fill in the blank. You're saying an old garment, and then instead of garment before, you're saying cloth. A piece of a new garment, yeah. A piece of a new cloth, you'll understand it's going to be part of the new garment when you say you're not putting it on the old garment. Yeah, I pretty much just already know, now I'm just trying to convince you why. I'm going to go with what Mark says. A piece of is from both. New cloth is only Mark. On an old garment. Upon an old. So an old is in both, but on or upon? Are you going to sew? Okay, the mention of sewing comes with on, and put is with upon in Luke. When you sew something, you sew it onto something else. I don't know if it would sound right if you're saying, I'm sewing something upon something else. That'd be like saying I'm going to place it. I'm going to sew it on. I think on sounds more correct. To sew cloth on an old garment. Sew a piece of new cloth upon an old garment. Now, I think on. I like on it. That seems to fit more. On. Mark only. And old is from both. And then back to Mark only, because Luke just ends with an old. And you fill in the blank yourself. Back to Mark. Garment. If otherwise, then both the new versus else the new. So else the new, or if otherwise, then both the new. Oh, you know what? This is more descriptive. Because in Mark it just says the new piece that has filled it up takes away from the old, and the rent is made worse. It's talking about taking away. That's really not descriptive at all. It's filled up, takes away from the old. It could mean it's taking away from the appearance, or that it's actually ripping it. Both of those are explained in Luke. If otherwise, then both, two things will happen. The new makes a rent, a tear, and the piece that was taken out of the new agrees not with the old. And there's underline, agrees not, doesn't match. So what's explained in Luke is way more descriptive than just takes away in Mark. I think I want to go with what's mentioned in Luke for the beginning of that sentence. If otherwise, then both, not just else. Or I could say else, both the new makes the rent and the piece that is taken away. Actually, saying else makes more sense because it sort of fits more with the earlier part of the sentence. No man also sews a piece of a new cloth on an old garment, else bad things will happen. But if you were to say, no man sews a piece of new cloth on an old garment, if otherwise, then bad things will happen. Yeah, else makes way more sense than saying if otherwise. It might be an older way of reading, or it might just be a more exact translation with the words in Luke. But because I have the choice of picking between Mark and Luke, and I'm not retranslating, and I can't mix them both, I can't say else if... Could I say else if otherwise? I guess I might be able to. Actually, it could be else if otherwise, because it's saying you're not going to do this because otherwise, meaning if you do, then both. So I could say else otherwise. It's like saying the same thing twice. Else otherwise. It's like saying but however. You don't need to say both. But you could, and I think I will just to be all-inclusive. Yeah, that's what I'll do. I'll go with the but however, else otherwise. No one could be mad. I heard a story that the reason why, I think it was the Council of Nicaea, when the people decided which books were going to be included in the official Bible, what works, what letters were going to be included, the final decision came down to picking all the books that everyone would agree with, pretty much. And there may have been many other books and writings that lots of people would have agreed with, but there would have been some who totally disagreed with it. So they chose the minimalist doctrine, if you will, the minimalist strategy. Everyone would agree with what's in the Bible, and seems to have worked out. So what I'm doing is kind of the opposite. It's kind of like the maximum. I'm including as many words as I possibly can because they're all from Scripture, instead of choosing one over the other. And sometimes I have to. You'll remember, I've definitely done that before. If I have to. I don't like it, but I've done that. But when I have the choice, it seems like I'm usually going with the maximum amount of words, just so that I'm not cutting anything out. So I'll do that here. I'll go with the else otherwise. So Mark just begins with else, the new. Luke has a much longer if otherwise, then both, the new. So I could say else if otherwise. That would fit. Yeah. Garment. So I could do the semicolon or the colon. That's the question now. Semicolon or colon. I'm going to go with a semicolon. That's from Luke only. And it's in red letters. Very important. Jesus spoke that semicolon. Alright. If otherwise. Else. Else is from Mark. Now, back to Luke. If otherwise. Then both. Okay, then both is still Luke. And then the new is in both. Peace that filled it up. The new makes a rent. Okay. Peace that filled it up is not in Luke and has no equivalent. It's just skipped. Just goes into what's happening. Makes a rent. Versus, it sort of is explained in Mark. Takes away. And that portion is much more explained in Luke, but this earlier set of words has no equivalent in Luke, so I'm just going to say it's from only Mark, and I will put these words. Peace that filled it up. Now, I'm not going to put takes away. Instead, I'm going to put the words makes a rent in Luke. Makes a rent. You know, I don't know. Actually, I think I might have to do some other solution here, because in Luke, it just says that this new piece makes a rent. It makes a tear, as if there was no tear before. No, okay, well, that's why you'd put a patch there in the first place. No, I still... Okay, this is why there's this issue, because in Mark, it doesn't just say it makes a rent. It says at the end of verse 21, the rent is made worse. That's the important part. It's not just that there's going to be a tear. It's that you have a tear. Your solution is literally making the problem worse. It's not that you're creating a problem, which would also be bad, but it would be better if the solution wasn't there. Your solution is making it worse. And I want to include that. Maybe I could say all that's in Mark, and then because it's as if it's only saying one thing, the tear is made worse, I could then add in at the end that extra bit from Luke saying the piece that was taken out of the new agrees not with the old, because it's more about it doesn't match. It's not just that it makes the tear worse, it's that it doesn't fit. Yeah, I think I'm going to do that. filled it up. I'm not just going to say makes a rent from Luke. I'm going to say, and the rent is made worse. That's more important. It's filled it up, takes away from the old, and a rent, and the rent. So the is still Mark, rent is both. And it'll have to be underlined, because people don't say that word anymore. We say tear. Is made worse from Mark makes a rent. No, it's just all from Mark. Rent is made worse. I don't know if this is God's sense of humor, or if this is just me being picky with words. I'm thinking about rent for a room that you're renting. Does that mean that the landlords are tearing money out of you? That's horrible. Anyway, rent is made worse. And now I'll add this end part from Luke. And the piece that was taken out of the old. Now, only Luke and the piece that was taken out of the new agrees not with the old. I've heard a little bit of expounding on this about God's way versus God's new way, and how it causes a whole bunch of strife amongst the church. So I think it's good that I have all these words included.